Merry Christmas to all of us from the Faith Bible Institute. With the holiday season upon us once again, some Christian parents find it very difficult because there's nothing perhaps more controversial than the subject of Santa Claus. Remembering the magic of our own childhoods, some of us hold firmly to the tradition of the jolly man in the red fur suit. I know I did as a child, brought up with parents who loved the idea, waiting for Santa Claus and trying to sleep at night. But others struggle with it as a secular concept that detracts from the celebration of the coming of Christ. And after I became a Christian, that was a dilemma for me. After all, if you think about it, our Santa songs don't mention Jesus, and the Christmas carols don't mention Santa. So in the familiar music of Christmas time, there seems to be a great divide. It's either Santa or the Christ, but not both. Ultimately, each family must prayerfully decide whether to embrace or reject the tradition of Santa Claus. But could there be a middle ground? A way to celebrate Santa Claus without using Santa as a replacement for Jesus, but rather a pointer to Jesus? Well, I want to suggest to you that this is a possibility. And further, that there really would be no Santa Claus without Jesus. So we can trace Santa Claus back to Christ. How, you ask? Well, let's start with the fact that Santa Claus is actually another name, an historical alias for an actual person by the name of St. Nicholas. But St. Nicholas was more than a person from history. He is easily one of the most celebrated saints throughout all history and throughout the whole world. The original St. Nicholas, and namesake for the eventual Santa Claus, was a follower of Jesus Christ and a faithful bishop or a local pastor in the 4th century Turkish town of Myra. You see it here circled on the map. He was born in the late 3rd century and he died in the mid 4th century and lived pretty much all of his days in this area. And here we'll pull the map away so you can see more clearly where that section of the world is. He was born to well-to-do Christian parents, and he learned that wealth should be used to help the poor. The strong Christian community in which he lived apparently traced its spiritual roots back to the converts of the Apostle Paul from his 3rd missionary journey when he landed in a city called Patara, which you can see also here on the map. In Acts 21:1, it talks about Paul's stopping there in Patara. Now, tragedy came early to the young Nicholas when his godly parents died from a plague that came to the area of Patara. One of his uncles, a committed Christian man, took him under his wing and raised him. Now, it may be at this time that Nicholas was moved from Patara to Myra, which is about 31 miles east of Patara, and that's where he spent the rest of his life. He is known today as Nicholas, Bishop of Myra. Acts 27:5 tells us Paul stopped in this town of Myra, a city of Lycia, and Lycia was the Roman province containing both the cities of Patara and Myra. And he did this on his way to Rome. Now, the earliest mention of Nicholas is in a list of bishops in which he is called specifically Nicholas of Myra of Lycia. This is a direct connection to our New Testament. Think about it. Just like Brother John tells us all the time, you can trust your Bible. The Bible is not a book of mythology. It's a book of history, telling us about real people and real places. Now, as a youth in Myra, he was mentored and raised to adulthood in the Christian faith, under the influence of his uncle, of course, and also the strong Christian community that was there in Myra. Eventually, Nicholas dedicated his life to the Christian ministry, and he became a bishop, and not just a bishop, but the Bishop of Myra at a young age. Nicholas was deeply influenced by 2 main sources: the Bible, especially the Gospels, and a book called the Didache, which is a fancy Greek word for simply teaching or instruction. It was believed by some that it was the teaching of the 12 apostles. Now this is not confirmed, but still this was an ancient document that was circulating among early Christian communities. And these two treasuries of original Christian thought had a profound formative influence on Nicholas. The Didache contains strong moral instruction rooted in the teachings of the Gospels. And from a very young age, even before he was bishop, Nicholas took to heart its instructions on how to live the Christian life. He embraced especially the great commandment to love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. The direct teachings of Jesus to summarize the whole moral life. These words in the Didache were called the way of life and were the very basis of the Didache, which was essentially an exposition of these principles. Now, Jesus' instructions in Matthew 6:3 to help the poor anonymously and secretly really resonated with Nicholas. Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing when you give your alms. And he gave to many needy people in his community without seeking reward or recognition in obedience to this principle that Jesus taught. Now, to further disguise his benevolence, he would go around at night and in the town when people were sleeping, and he dropped gold coins through open windows to help them. The picture here on the left actually shows you Nicholas dropping coins into a window of an elderly, sickly, poor man, and he had 3 daughters that he couldn't provide for. Nicholas heard about their need and began to give them from his wealth to help them out. And so one night the man woke up, or waited up, and he caught Nicholas in the act. And that's what you see here in the right-hand picture, Nicholas being found out. But it's because he loved children, and he often made children the objects of his special favor. And this man had 3 daughters he couldn't provide for, so Nicholas cared for them. Yet despite his attempts at anonymity, St. Nicholas could not keep it a secret, and he was discovered by the town's kind benefactor. Long after his death, people continued to tell and even make up stories about his kindness, generosity, and self-sacrifice. And legends and miracles became central to the stories people remembered and told about him. And no doubt these miracle stories played a part in his eventually being called Saint Nicholas and the eventual development of the modern-day Santa Claus. But you're wondering, how exactly did Nicholas become Saint Nicholas and eventually Santa Claus, that jolly old elf who flies around the world on Christmas Eve delivering presents to children? That's a great question, but it's a long story, and we will take that up in part 2 of our series.